Now from Chinovio by Tina Fordham, founder of Fordham Global Foresight. Tina, nice to see you, particularly with that backdrop. Fantastic. Look, we're looking at a geopolitical story that is increasingly looking tougher and tougher. Do you think financial markets have underestimated just how big an impact that some of these geopolitical risks could have?
Well, good morning, Guy. It's great to be with you from Lake Como and the Ambrosetti Forum. I think this is probably the best backdrop I've ever had for an interview. But as you say, the geopolitical risks are starting to come to the fore exactly at a time when markets are anticipating a series of rate cuts, notwithstanding what Neil Kashkari said. Of course, he is a non-voting Fed member. I think it has to be said. I think what's happening with regard to the Middle East is, Bibi Netanyahu has always almost prided himself on antagonizing U.S. presidents and seeing how far he can push things. And I absolutely do think markets have been underpricing the risk. You know about my thesis on the new geopolitical risk supercycle, which I wrote almost a year ago now, before the war in the Middle East. This juncture is actually an ideal moment for actors who want to take advantage of the fact that the U.S. is overstretched with its exposure to the Ukraine war, plus in a pre-election campaign season, and the expectation that Washington won't want to get involved or push back on this kind of activity. It is a gamble, but I do think markets may be starting to wake up to that.
In terms of the other risks that go along with this, clearly the involvement of Iran is becoming more and more problematic, certainly for global markets. And the comments yesterday from Bibi Netanyahu talking about the fact that Israel will take a tough line, whether that involves actually kind of attacking Iran directly or via its proxies, certainly caught everybody's attention. Are we at the point where we could see a further escalation of that conflict? How far away could that be?
Well, we are seeing a further escalation, and in my view, the escalation has been continuing, perhaps incrementally, for some time, with the Houthi rebels, which are, proxies of Iran, and Israel retaliating against the embassy, as you mentioned. Whether there will be, direct state-to-state conflict between Israel and Iran remains to be seen. I don't expect it, but what I think investors should be thinking about is the kind of range of these gray zone attacks. And I think we should expect to see more of them. So, the ideal sort of target is to inflict damage and to undermine the capacity of your adversary without triggering a full-blown military response. We could see more of those. I think we will see more of those. And in fact, the pre-U.S. election period is likely to see an escalation in both the Middle East and in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, in my view.
Tina, one of the things we are seeing, and you referenced this earlier, is an effect on domestic politics. In the United States, it's having an impact within the Democratic Party. Here in the UK, it's having an impact both with the Labour Party and, as we've seen with the headlines this morning, the ruling Conservative Party. It's happening in many other parts of Europe as well. What impact do you think the war in Gaza is ultimately going to have on developed market politics? Do you think it could be significant in terms of direction, in some of the key directions that governments will take?
It's a new situation, right? Western support, U.S. and UK, European support for Israel has been rock solid for decades now. The idea that there could be a change in this trend, a kind of a slowing of that support would have, I think, manifold implications. You mentioned in the UK where there's pushback on supplying arms. In the U.S., I think it's something more profound, a re-examination of those links. What that would mean for Israel in a hostile Middle East is one point. The domestic election point, I mean, very rarely does foreign policy actually move the needle when it comes to domestic elections, which we're going to have in the UK at some point this year. We still don't know. But for young voters who are, learning a lot about politics and getting their news on TikTok, for example, this is very real. And I think the Middle East conflict and the divisions that it is exposing are just the tip of the iceberg, really.
Let me just quickly take you to China. Janet Yellen, the Treasury Secretary, is currently there and taking a tough line on China and its industrial overcapacity. Do you think that is a prelude, a precursor to tougher sanctions, tougher tariffs coming from the Biden administration? We're in the final stages of a review of those tariffs. Should we be now anticipating that those tariffs are tightened?
Well, let's remember that the Biden administration has actually kept intact the Trump-era sanctions, right? So, has maintained those. And this points to something that is, what we might call a constant or something in common between both Trump policy and Biden policy, which is being tough on China and America first, but with, different tone, different rhetoric. Yellen will go and she will be constructive, but her remarks have been quite revealing about the mistakes made during globalization, peak globalization. So I don't see it as a prelude to more sanctions so much as kind of trying to draw a clear position about what the administration is willing to tolerate from China.
Tina, always great to catch up. Thanks for the insight. Tina Fordham, founder of Fordham Global Foresight, joining us from the shores of Lake Como, Villa d'Este.